Hello, welcome along to the Raw podcast post-deadline day show for you here today. My name is James Copley and I'm joined by the BBC's Nick Barnes. Nick, how are you today?
Very well. Good, all good.
Was a busy day yesterday, really, wasn't it?
It was, not unexpectedly. I think we were conscious there could have been a couple of signings and quite a bit of movement out, which is as it panned out, because Regis de Vries has been saying in his press conferences the last few weeks that they were still looking for a centre-half. They were still trying to find a winger. And obviously with the events of the last few days with Mark Guiu, then the emphasis turned towards a striker as well. So always knew it would be busy. And because of the number of players they want to sort of try and move on, that there'd be movement in that direction as well, because the squad is clearly oversized, if you like, with players that are not going to be involved this season or not involved very much. So there was obviously going to be players on the move, and that's how it turned out.
That Guiu one's going to make a great quiz question, isn't it, one day? I mean, he signed for Sunderland in the summer, 3 appearances, 1 goal, and then he goes back to Chelsea. It's a strange situation. I think Christian Speakman referenced that, didn't he, in his thoughts after Guiu had left. But what is your reading of that been? Because it doesn't harm to do Chelsea a favour, does it, in the transfer market, because they've got so many good players, and Christian Speakman touched on a decent relationship between the two clubs. But it feels a little bit to me like Sunderland had a little look at him, were prepared to keep him, but once the Robbie deal was there to be done, they were quite happy to let him go when the finances were right.
It is a strange one, but I mean the thing about it all was that Sunderland always held all the cards. They didn't have to send Guiu back. I mean, as part of those season-long loans, once you've gone, you've gone. I mean, that's part of the reason I think for clubs charging the fees they do for the loan fee, because technically in a strange way you're buying the player, but albeit borrowing the player. But so Sunderland had the cards. He was their player, but as you touched on just before, Chelsea and Sunderland have a good relationship. So I think in view of the fact that they probably thought they were going to get Brian Robbie over the line, and that meant that they had a player on board who was actually theirs. They were buying him. Was in one sense an upgrade on having the loan of Guiu. The difference in experience is important, I think, as well. Guiu's inexperience, albeit highly thought of, whereas Robbie is experienced. He's a Dutch international, albeit only 8 caps, but nonetheless, he's still a Dutch international. And he becomes Sunderland's player. So I think, all things considered, Guiu hasn't had a great deal of game time in the three games that he was here. 1 game against Huddersfield, lower league opposition, with all due respect, and a couple of substitute appearances in the Premier League where his impact was sort of negligible, in fairness. So I think Sunderland looked at it in the round and thought, well, let's keep our relationship with Chelsea sweet. We've got a player coming in. If that gets over the line, which it did, and so they allowed Guiu to go back to Chelsea. So I think, all things considered, it was the most sensible thing to do, pragmatic, and as I said, keeps alive that relationship with Chelsea.
Yeah, it seems to have worked out well in that regard. There was a lot of talk, Barnsley coming into the transfer window deadline, about John Lukemi. That didn't end up going through in the end, but Sunderland did sign a defender. Now I'm going to try and get the pronunciation right here. Is it Gertrude?
As much as I do. I've seen a couple of pronunciations. Gertrude, until I think we speak to the player himself. I mean, I think as much as we can try and tackle the surname, the Christian name's got as much difficulty as the surname. So
yeah, well, I'm not
quite sure how you pronounce that either. So,
just as an aside, I was laughing the other day when we spoke to McQuayle after the Huddersfield Town game, and you asked him how he pronounced his name, and he gave you three different ways of doing it.
Yeah, we're still not convinced that we know the actual pronunciation, but I'm going with Michele on that one. As far as I'm concerned, when I said Michele, he said yes, that's good enough for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, Sunderland did get a defender over the line. He can play fullback, he can play in the middle. Sunderland wanted an out-and-out centre-back. That doesn't appear to have happened, but they do have a lot of versatile players there now. We saw that new centre-back partnership against Brentford, didn't we, that did quite well with Mukele and Alderweireld. So Sunderland have options there, it feels, without having secured the number one target.
Yeah, they have. And also, I think, they've got Reinildo, who can play as a centre-back as well, which he's done in pre-season and against West Ham. So that if push comes to shove, if they are struggling for numbers, they've got players that can slot into those roles. They've got Masuaku, who can play left back if Reinildo has to play in the middle. You've got Mukele now, who can play right back, centre back. The new lad, who can obviously again is versatile. I think in the ideal world, Alderweireld and Ballard are going to be the first choice centre backs. If Ballard can stay fit, Alderweireld likewise, then they've got the balance is that's what they're looking at. I think that also impacts later in the season, the African Cup of Nations, the fact that Alderweireld and Ballard will stay. They're not going anywhere because their nationalities. So there is some sort of stability across the back four with injuries permitting. So I think they've no doubt looked at that as well. But look, numbers in terms of defenders. I mean, Jensen Sealt's gone out on loan, but I think that was always going to be the case if they got another experienced defender in, because Sealt's game time would be so limited, and he needs to develop. So that's a good move for him. But essentially, now the window's shut. They've got good cover across the back four, and I think with the way that the team is set up now in the Premier League, that is going to be that's the sort of fulcrum of their success. It's to not concede goals and catch teams on their counter-attack. So they've got players now in place, and they've got cover for all of them. So I think that, that's been quite clever, quite astute to get those signings over the line.
And as well as the new lads, Barnsley, there's also Luke O'Nien to come back from injury, just signed a new 2-year deal. Adji Elise as well, who's very injury prone, but a player that I really, really like. If he could stay fit, I think he could potentially be a Premier League player one day if he got a run of games. So it does feel like there's a lot of cover there, with the caveat that we don't know how those two names mentioned, Luke O'Nien and Adji, will adapt to Premier League football, or how much they'll even play. Well,
that's the thing. How much will they play? I mean, Adji, probably by his own admission, is not necessarily going to get a lot of game time. If he hadn't been injured, there's maybe a fair chance he'd have gone out on loan. Luke O'Nien, he will be, I think, as ever, not much game time, but instrumental in the dressing room. That's where he has his influence these days. At some point, I suspect he'll come on in a game. It will give him, the opportunity to say he's played Premier League football. But he's, I think, will always be seen as a valued member of the squad, just because of the impact he has as an individual in terms of leadership. So they've all, I think, in one way or another, they will all have their parts to play. I mean, there will be, I think, possibly, and this might still change, some movement in terms of Pervader and Barr and those players that they're on the periphery. They're the difficult ones, because they're not going to be involved in the first team squad. Very little involvement football wise, and you don't really want them sitting around the club twiddling their thumbs. But as I say, the various windows are still open, so there might be opportunities to move them on. But we'll watch what unfolds over the next few days in regards of them.
Yeah, I believe the Mexican transfer window is still open if we fancy doing our newfound brothers and sisters a favour over there.
It's worth looking at.
It is Bertrand Traore, Barnsley, coming in 2.5 million, 1-year contract with the club option for another year. 29 years old, a lot of experience, obviously dangerous attacker. We've seen bits and pieces of him over the years. Feels to me like a smart bit of business, relatively low fee. There's no sort of massive financial commitment, and if he turns out to be good and contributes, that's a good thing. He's good cover, isn't he, for Adingra Talby? And I think with the Brobby signing as well, Barnsley, as a striker, signals that perhaps Lebris could use Mayenda on the right if needed. Obviously, we know Wilson Isidore can maybe deputise on the left, although not always ideal to have him starting there. So again, like in defence, I feel like there's good options all around the pitch without having seen the new lads play, of course. But on paper, I'm quite comfortable with where we're at.
Yeah, I think the winger situation was always one they needed to get sorted. With all due respect to Talby, I don't think he's necessarily, while he's done well, he's got the shirt at the moment. There's no pressure on him in one sense because there's no competition for Talby's position on the right. So I think it's good to get someone in who offers them another option in that respect. Look, you said they can switch things around. They showed at the weekend. Lefay can come and play on the left. Adingra can doubtless play both wings. Mayenda can play right side. They've got those options, but I think to have the extra body in the building with the experience that Traore's got, considerable Premier League experience as well as playing abroad. That is a very, very good signing. I'm looking forward to seeing him, but I think it was something that they needed. That was the slot they needed to fill as much as they needed a striker. Everyone says, "Oh, you need to get another striker in the building." I think the right winger was important as well for the balance of the squad and going forwards when they do lose players to the African Cup of Nations and injuries and so on. Basing the tactics so heavily on the wings and trying to get the ball into the front man to have a lack of bodies in that respect, I think was always a little bit of a worry. So very, very good signing to my mind. Yeah.
That meant, though, that Patrick Roberts left on a season-long loan to Birmingham City. I think a lot of Sunderland fans are a little bit gutted about this just because of the contribution he's made. We should point out a brilliant professional, highly regarded by everybody at the club, a really good and honest interviewee as well, Barnsley, which for us makes all the difference because sometimes you can cringe when you get certain players put up because of the lack of getting anything out of them. But Patrick Roberts was always quite the opposite, and just a really, really nice lad, wasn't he? And came to Sunderland with his career sort of on the rocks a little bit, and God, he's really turned it round. And I think testament to him and his character as well is that he just wanted to play football and didn't see himself playing football at Sunderland this summer. I think he was sort of told by the club and decided the best thing for him to do was to go out and earn his money elsewhere, which I have a huge amount of respect for.
Yeah, absolutely. Echo everything you said there, 100%. And I'm sorry to see him go. He's a lovely guy. He's very humble. As you mentioned, when you're interviewing him, he's very honest about his own performances. And he will happily talk to you and be honest about him and where he's at and how he's playing. And he's been a fantastic addition to the club since he arrived. We'll all remember that fantastic goal at Hillsborough. He's been on that journey from League One through to the Premier League, played in the Premier League again just the other week at Burnley. But, as you say, ultimately, he's still at a stage in his career where he needs to play football, I think, on a regular basis. And that clearly wasn't going to happen this season at Sunderland. And he's going to a club which is on the up, which could well be challenging for promotion again this season, to where the head coach is someone he knows because he was at Celtic with him. So hopefully, he will get game time. He'll enjoy his football, and as you say, what a lovely, lovely guy. And I know from what I've read on social media how many people are sorry to see him go, and the influence and the effect he had when he was here. Yeah, really, really nice guy. So I'm wishing him all the very best.
Yeah, me too. And it just speaks, I guess, to the ruthless nature of football, doesn't it? We had it before, maybe he's with like the Lyndon Gooch, Danny Bath, when they were moved on. It's hard to take sometimes, isn't it, from a supporter perspective?
I think the Lyndon Gooch is a good example. A player who didn't want to go, didn't have a good time at Stoke, wasn't very happy there, but now has been given a new lease of life at Huddersfield, told by the manager there, come here and reignite your love of football, enjoy yourself again, which is brilliant because Lyndon, again, is like Patrick Roberts, so well liked, such a humble guy. So I think football is brutal. We know that, and the nature of You only have to look at I was thinking the other morning about certain players who sort of get shifted from here to there and everywhere on loan and never really get put down any roots anywhere.
He was sent out on loan. I looked this up yesterday. I think it was 6 or 7 times by Manchester City. Six or 7 separate occasions. Just insane.
And he wasn't happy. I mean, in himself, he felt unsettled, if you like. And for Patrick Roberts, Sunderland gave him a family, if you like. So I think it's difficult for players sometimes, but it's great when you hear the stories like Lyndon Gooch enjoying his football again. Hopefully, Patrick Roberts will enjoy his football at Birmingham, and who knows what will happen in the future down the line. But it's I think the other one was Noel Huggins going to Wickham. I think it's a great move for him because he will get football again on a regular basis, which he needs, and with a coach that he knows and at a good football club. So fingers crossed for Noel Huggins again. I think that's another good deal because clearly with the players they've been bringing in, Huggins was going to be a way down the pecking order.
Yeah, Noel Huggins, I think, has got all the talent in the world, hasn't he? It would just be great. Similar to Adji Alisi, if he could get a run of games. I guess the other headline departure, Barnsley, was Alan Brown to Middlesbrough, which I think is just a transfer that makes a lot of sense. I think he's a weird one, isn't he, Alan Brown? Because he was the right player at the right time, but unfortunately, due to those injuries, it just didn't work out, did it?
Great move for him.
I mean, he got promoted, so you could say it definitely did work out. From a personal perspective.
Yeah, I mean, didn't probably get as much football as he'd hoped to have got, but this is a good move for him. He's not, again, going to get much game time at Sunderland, but he's settled in the northeast with his family. Middlesbroughs are absolutely perfect for him, especially with the start to the season that they've made. So pleased for him. That again is a sensible move. He gets football. He doesn't have to up sticks and move. Middlesbrough get a good player, and he's playing at a high level. And again, like Patrick Roberts, he could well find himself involved in a promotion campaign again. So that all round ticks all the boxes.
That would be interesting, wouldn't it, if they met on opposite sides at Wembley in
yes.
May? That would be a good story. 15 players brought into Sunderland during the transfer window as a whole. I'll just go through them. There was Alderete, Ronaldo, Xhaka, Adingra, Talbi, Robin Rooks, Michele, Masuaku, Habib Diarra, Noah Siddiqui, Mark Guiu, although he ended up going back, Enzo Lefebvre, Traore, Broby, and Gertruda. If I'd have said to you, Barnsley, that all of this would happen, we'd sign Granit Xhaka to be £150 million spent after Tommy Watson's goal at Wembley, I'm not sure I would have believed what I was saying to you, and I don't think you would have believed what I was saying to you either. It's been incredible, hasn't it?
It has. I'm not even sure Regis Lebris would believe it either. He was asked that question last week, and I think he almost admitted that, he's living in a bit of a dream world because he didn't necessarily expect the club to spend in the manner in which they have, or bring in the numbers that they have. I mean, it's a whole new team, isn't it, effectively? And all credit to the one or two that are still. All credit to the one or two who are still in the squad from last season, and they're having an impact. Wilson Isidore, Enzo Lefebvre, Trey Hume, they've all had a part to play. Mayenda have all had their parts to play in the season so far. So, what Regis Lebris, and all credit to him for the start that they've made, what he has done has got all these new players in, but seems to have created a good team with a good team spirit. Not an easy thing to do. So a lot of credit has to go to him and his coaching staff for affecting that so early. And I think that was another key thing about the transfer window. They got a lot of the business done early in the window, which was important, I think, to build the foundations for that team that they seem to be blending and merging together now into what will hopefully be a team that stays in the Premier League. And the statistic that Simon Pride gave us yesterday was that no team who had 8 points after 5 games has been relegated. So Sunderland are well on course with Crystal Palace and Aston Villa coming up, 2 teams at the moment who seem to be in transition to achieve that, which would be incredible.
And it does feel like a hugely exciting time, doesn't it? I mean, Sunderland's promotion from the Championship to the Premier League, it just seems to have triggered a different level of operation and thinking, and it's been fantastic to see. not only in terms of on the field and the level of signings, but just in general, the Academy of Lights renovations, Stadium of Light changes, all of this sort of stuff. It feels like a Premier League club again, or like it's building towards becoming a Premier League club again.
Well, what I also thought about over the weekend is that they haven't lost sight of who they are. We still, the players are still happy in doing interviews and very approachable. Regis, likewise. There's not a feeling which can happen so easily in the Premier League, and I've seen it happen before. When Sunderland were there last time, you can get an us and them atmosphere. And lose sight of what got you there in the first place and how important
a couple of wins helps, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. I mean, of course it does. But I think it's been Regis Lebris has been quite canny in sort of highlighting how important the fans have been so far this season as well, and the atmosphere at the Stadium of Light, and the away support, because that is fundamentally, look at the support at the end of last season. The stadium was absolutely humming. It was fantastic. I mean, and that is that's one reason Sunderland are here. That's why they have an enormous part to play, and I think it's very, very important the club doesn't lose that disconnect between the fans and the players and the playing side, because once that happens, I think it's a slippery slope. And you slide into what happened the last time out with Sunderland, players that really have no sort of affiliation to Sunderland. They were just here for the money. And now you get a sense the players are here because they want to be here, they want to be part of something, and they're embracing the project in inverted commas. So long may that last, because, as I say, if it doesn't last, it fragments. And you find yourself in an awkward situation where the club becomes, I think, again, a little bit of too big and not in tune with its community, if you like.
And it is very rare to sort of feel this way, isn't it? I'll use Lebris's word connection, because there is a connection, it feels like, between players, fans, players, hierarchy, fans. And I think once you get that sort of golden triangle, it is really powerful and really important. You've been doing this job a long time, but to me as a supporter, I don't really feel like there's been this sort of momentum really in my lifetime, other than really the radios, of which I was a bit too young to remember, and just the sequence really of the playoffs, Wembley, and then these two open and home Premier League games. I know they were poor against Burnley away, but they've been incredible. The crowds have been incredible. The late drama, the till the end slogan. It feels like everything's just feeding in to momentum. And I've said it on the podcast before, and I've had Sunderland described to me as an oil tanker. It's really hard to turn around, but once you do actually get it motoring, it's actually quite hard to stop. And it feels that way at the moment. How long that'll last in the Premier League, I don't know, simply because it's going to be tough. You play really good teams. We're yet to play Liverpool, Man City, Tottenham, Arsenal, any of those sort of guys. But it feels like there's a lot of credit in the bank for this group of players and for the ownership at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talk about Peter Reid and those years; they were absolutely fantastic. And then I came into the club. I mean, I was here, but I was not covering Sunderland at the time. So I was aware, and I actually covered a few Sunderland games in between times. So I was very aware of that sort of that squad, that team, Peter Reid, and the blend they had then. The other time, I think there was a little bit of feeling that things were starting to turn around. Was ironically with Steve Bruce, and then going into to Gus Poyet and the League Cup final. That sort of the mid. 2010, 2015, those 4 or 5 years, we had players like Fabio Brini, Lorik Sana, Bolo Zenden, a lot of players who they understood what it was all about. They bought into to Sunderland, and there was a feeling then that the club was actually, it was in a position to go places, but it actually it fell apart, which was a great shame, and because they had the platform to go on and push on, but it just never happened. And so we descended into that, 2016, 17, so and we all know about the last 8 years. So there have been little chapters, and I think this is the start of a new one. Completely different philosophy, completely different coaching style, completely different team, completely different approach, if you like. But one
the hierarchy is completely different now to what it looked like
so
under
very,
Bruce
very
and stuff.
different. But that's how the Premier League has changed. I mean, we talk about the Peter Reid years, and you in so many ways you can't compare them to now, because football in the Premier League has changed so drastically. And in the 8 years that Sunderland have been out of the Premier League, it's markedly changed. When we're talking about teams like Brentford and Bournemouth and Brighton being established Premier League clubs, and the models that they all have adopted, the coaches are all coming down. The coaches are all young now. Then, by and large, I mean, young, sort of 30 to 40, 50. That compared to when you're looking back to Peter Reid, your Martin O'Neills, your Dick Advocats, there's a change in the fact that Keith Andrews is now the head coach at Brentford.
Brighton's head coach as well is very
Brighton,
young, isn't he?
Iriola, yeah. So and Iriola at Bournemouth. So the whole profile of the clubs has changed. The methodology's changed. The level of skill, I think, has changed. The pace, the speed of the football has changed. It's a whole new landscape now, the Premier League, to even 8 years ago, let alone 20, 25 years ago. So this is the start of a new chapter. Sunderland are in it. They want to stay in it. They've made almost the perfect start and given themselves a real platform to stay there. And as we talked about this the weekend, that you need probably 10, 11 wins plus a few draws, and that you'll be safe. Well, Sunderland got 2 now. And I know it doesn't sound a lot, but
it's the first time since 2001 as well, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah, only the second time they've done it. Yeah. So, but 8 wins. Can you see Sunderland getting 8 wins this season? I can see them picking up 8 wins.
So only 6 more to go.
So it's within their grasp now, and they've got the squad, they've got the players, they've got the coach, they've got the tools, if you like, to do it now.
I think the key thing for me is that given we've played 3 games, have I seen 3 teams that could potentially be worse than Sunderland? And you only need one to be, worse, really, I guess. And I think I have, to be honest. So far, I know things can change. January's can come, form fluctuates, but I think there's candidates that Sunderland could be ahead of.
But I'm hoping so. I mean, I'm cautious because I think there's a lot of talk about West Ham being in trouble, and then they go to Nottingham Forest and win 3-0.
Yeah, that's it.
It's very difficult at the moment to, I think, establish who will struggle and who won't. But I think there's a school of thought that Crystal Palace may have problems because Glasner wanted to bring in 4 or 5 players, haven't been able to do that. I mean, isn't it a great irony that Isak and Wissa both go on strike and so on to engineer moves? Mark Guillet is the ultimate professional, has done everything by the book and doesn't get a move. So all credit to him, but unfortunately he'll probably be in the team to face Sunderland next time out.
That's a good point. That's a very good point.
And then they've got a very good defensive record. But to try and work out which teams will struggle, it's a strange one, because when we do our predictions at the beginning of the season, I look at the table and I think, well, I can't actually nail down which of these teams is going to be in the bottom 3. I mean, if I believe that Sunderland can stay up, and I think Leeds will probably stay up, and I think Burnley have got a very good chance of staying up as well. Who else do you look at as Brentford? A lot of people thought that Brentford might be an option. That you've got to beat the teams in and around you, but Brentford historically, since they came back to the Premier League, have always finished top half of the Premier League. So
and it's peculiar now. Everyone's got to win in the Premier League now as well.
Yeah, I say all top half. I think they finished 16th one season, but nonetheless, Brentford now they are an established Premier League team, and Bournemouth we've mentioned, Brighton we've mentioned. I mean, Wolves has talked about they may struggle, and the fact that they're bottom after 3 with no points and 3 defeats possibly suggests they'll be one of the 3 that go down. but it is early, so it's very, very difficult to try and pinpoint which teams are going to be in trouble.
You've touched on it there, but you can struggle in the Premier League and actually still be quite a decent team because the quality is just insane, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it only takes a second to score a goal, and Sunderland have been punished in that respect a couple of times already this season.
Absolutely. Just touch on the Brentford game very quickly, Barnsley, before I let you go. But I was really pleased with that just because I thought it was firstly good to bounce back from the Burnley game. I thought the intensity returned to Sunderland's play. I don't think that's any coincidence that it was at the Stadium of Light and the fans sort of drove that. And I think the players are really starting to feed off that. But it was good, I think, that Sunderland faced a little bit of adversity. They had a good check. They had to come from behind. They fell down to a late goal, really, and it looked, I thought it was done when that went in. I wasn't expecting Sunderland to come back, but all credit to them. They didn't feel sorry for themselves. They did. And all of these late winners that Sunderland seem to score, it can't just be coincidence. It has to come down to mentality, fitness. It keeps happening and happening. So I think something is building in that regard. That sort of fosters that belief between the fans and the players that they can do it again. So I was hugely pleased. That probably agreed with Keith Andrews in a sense that a point would have been a fair result. Perhaps Sunderland just shaded it. But yeah, I was delighted with that performance and the result.
Another game, it just shows you that moments in games can be so important in the Premier League. And I'm thinking back to Burnley, if Mayenda had scored early on or Talby had scored, that game may have been a completely different game. Sunderland, they got a little bit of luck. The offside goal, the penalty miss. You can sort of have a feeling that if Brentford had got either of those goals, it could have been a different story. They did get a good goal when Sunderland switched off. And like you, I thought that was probably going to be it. Brentford scoring so late and having such a good away record, I thought that would be a 1-0 Brentford win. But Sunderland's resolve, I think, shown perhaps best by the winner, came from a fantastic Lefay pass on the left wing, a moment of terrific cross from Xhaka, and a fantastic header from Wilson Isidore, albeit Kelleher probably should have done better with it. But to have that quality going into the 96th minute in the game when Lefay and Xhaka had started the game, I just thought there was, what you say about this team just won't give up. It just keeps going, it keeps going, it keeps going. And the fans, the stadium was full still. They'd gone one down, there's 10 minutes to go, but the stadium remained full. Nobody left. And it was full at the end. And, that's, again, brilliant. And that's all, it's the change there. So there's clearly resolve in this team and there's clearly determination. There's still areas I'm sure Regis Debris is concerned about. The fact that they did concede two goals really, one that was chalked off, but albeit they were still very open and got caught. And the goal that stood, again, too easy, far too easy for Thiago to get the header in that position. So there are areas that clearly they're going to have to address. But what is encouraging is for a team that we thought was going to struggle to score goals, they scored 3 against West Ham. They scored 2 against Brentford. They could have had a couple at Burnley. So they have got goals in them at this level. But as you touched on earlier on, they've still got to play Liverpool and Manchester City and Chelsea and Arsenal and Tottenham.
It could be a reality check at some point, couldn't it?
As the past has shown us, sometimes you go to one of those and expect nothing and come away with something. It can be that quirky sometimes, and Sunderland often have put in some very good performances away from home at some of those clubs. So history sometimes weighs heavily on them at certain places like Liverpool. But with this team, it can only build its self-belief and its confidence can only grow. Started on a high. They're not sitting at the foot of the table with no points, which a lot of people from outside of the area would have predicted. They're sitting in 6th place with 6 points, which is remarkable.
Crazy. I thought you touched on it there, but that Granit Xhaka assist, I thought that was a really wonderful moment in a sense where he receives the ball back from Enzo Lefay, and a younger player, a more eager player, a less experienced player may have whipped that in as quickly as he could. but
Yeah.
he just seemed to take his time. He knew there was nobody around him. He picked the perfect pass. It was so elegant the way he sort of swung his foot round to that ball. He slowed everything down and made sure that the emphasis was on quality rather than, getting it into the box as quickly as possible, which a lot of players may have done in the 96th minute.
Very good word, elegant. I think elegant was what it was. I mean, it was a measured, beautiful touch, perfect pinpoint onto Isidore's head. It's moments like that, isn't it? That's when players of his caliber come into their own. That's why they're in the team. That's why there's no experience. There's no replacement for experience. When you get players like that in the heat of the moment, the pressure's on. You're in the 96th minute. You could have sat back for a point, but no, they were still driving for a winner. And he will be part of that drive. He will be someone who's, he's rallied the troops, if you like, earlier on with everything he said about making history and being in it to win and so on and so on. And he's playing by example, if you like, and driving everyone on around him.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for joining us, Barnesy. What have you got coming up over the next couple of days? Where can we hear from you? What have you got going on?
Well, we're talking to Christian Speakman today, a sort of recap on the window and the way forward. Total Sport, of course, every night on BBC Radio Newcastle, back on 6 o'clock tonight and tomorrow night and Friday night. And then international break, obviously, this weekend. Back to the football next week with the build up to Crystal Palace.
Yeah, we've got 2 weeks now to try and find something to talk about, haven't we? I'm sure we'll manage though.
I don't think there's a lack of anything to talk about at the moment.
No, well, cheers, Nick. Thanks for joining, and thanks to the listener for tuning in. You can head over to the Sunderland website for all of the latest news post deadline day and during the international break ahead of Sunderland's next game against Crystal Palace. Thank you for joining.